The city lights below had blurred into watercolor smears, and Dana Summers realized she couldn't remember the last time someone had looked her directly in the eyes. She stood on the bridge's pedestrian walkway, fingers loose on the cold railing, watching the black river swallow reflections. 3 in the morning, the hour when the world admitted it didn't need you. Her phone lay silent in her pocket, no messages, no calls. She'd stopped existing so gradually she hadn't noticed until the absence became total. The Hartley family had done that. Taken 5 years of her life, her contacts, her confidence, the version of herself that used to laugh easily. They'd hired her as a personal assistant to old Mrs. Hartley, then slowly expanded her duties until she lived in their estate, managed their social calendar, handled their correspondence, became invisible furniture in their ornate rooms. When she'd finally tried to leave last month, they'd smiled and told her no one would hire her, no references, no recent work history they'd acknowledge, gaps she couldn't explain. Her friends had stopped calling years ago. Her family had moved to Oregon without telling her the new address. She'd checked herself out of existence trying to be indispensable to people who'd made her disappear. Not while I still breathe. The voice came from behind her, low and certain, with an accent that suggested centuries rather than countries. Dana didn't turn. She didn't startle. Some part of her had stopped being surprised by anything. "I'm not," she started. "You don't have to explain." Footsteps, measured and unhurried, brought him to the railing 6 feet away. Respectful distance. "But I've learned that 3 a.m. on bridges rarely ends in changing one's mind and going home, so I'm staying." Dana finally looked. He was tall, inhumanly beautiful in a way that made her breath catch. White hair fell past his shoulders, bone straight and luminous in the streetlight. His skin was pale as frost, flawless. He wore dark clothes that looked expensive and old-fashioned, a long coat over a tailored shirt, like he'd stepped from a different era and simply refused to update. His eyes were gray, the color of winter skies, and they held weight. She should have been afraid. Instead, she felt seen for the first time in months. "You're not going to try to grab me or call someone?" Her voice sounded strange to her own ears, unused. "No. Your choices are your own." He gazed out at the water. "But I wonder if you've truly chosen this, or if you've simply been told so many times that you don't matter that you've started to believe it." Dana's throat tightened. "You don't know anything about me. I know what it looks like when someone has been erased carefully." He turned to face her fully, and his expression carried an ancient sadness. "I know how certain people excel at making others feel like ghosts, and I know that pain, however overwhelming, does shift, given time, given witnesses. There's no one left to witness me." The words came out broken. "I checked. I went to my old coffee shop yesterday. The one I went to every morning for 2 years before the Hartleys. The barista looked right through me. I found my college roommate's social media. She got married last year. I wasn't invited. I wasn't even a footnote. It's like I was never real." "You're real." His voice carried absolute conviction. "You're standing here. You're speaking. You exist whether they acknowledge it or not. That's not enough." "I know." He paused. "May I tell you something true? 500 years ago I failed to reach someone in time. Someone who felt as you do now. I was delayed by politics, by pride, by assuming I had more time. When I arrived there was only silence. I have carried that silence ever since." Dana studied him, really looked. The old world clothing, the too pale skin. The way he stood so still he barely seemed to breathe. "What are you grieving?" he said quietly, and determined not to add to my collection of silences. "My name is Gideon Quentin. I am very old, very tired, and asking you to give me this one night. Stay until dawn. Talk to me or don't, but let someone bear witness that you were here." Something in his words cracked through her numbness. "Why do you care?" "Because I didn't care enough once, and someone died alone, thinking they were forgotten." His eyes met hers. "I won't let that be true again. Not on my watch." The absurdity of it should have made her laugh or run. Instead, Dana found herself sliding down to sit on the cold sidewalk, back against the railing. After a moment, Gideon folded himself down as well, maintaining that careful distance. "I worked for the Hartley family," she said into the darkness. 5 years. They were connected, old money, old power. Mrs. Hartley knew everyone. At first it felt like an honor. She said I was special, said I had a gift for organization, for smoothing things over. Then it was just one more task, one more event. Stay late, come early, move into the guest house so I'd be available. My boyfriend left because I was never around. My friends stopped inviting me out because I always canceled. The Hartleys said they needed me, that I was family, but you weren't. No, I was staff they didn't have to acknowledge. When I finally said I was quitting, Mrs. Hartley laughed, said I had no references, she'd make sure of that, said the gaps in my resume would raise questions I couldn't answer. Her son threatened to sue me for stealing if I took anything, even my own belongings I'd brought when I moved in. They had lawyers, I had nothing. What you have, Gideon said carefully, is knowledge of how they operate. And you have yourself, which they never owned, no matter how thoroughly they convinced you otherwise. Myself isn't worth much. Tell me one thing you loved before them. The question startled her. Dana opened her mouth, closed it. Tried to remember. Gardening, she said finally. I used to grow herbs on my apartment balcony, basil and rosemary and mint. I liked keeping things alive, and what did the Hartleys grow? Just roses, red ones. Mrs. Hartley said they were the only flower worth cultivating. Everything else was weeds, Mrs. Hartley. Gideon said with quiet precision, is a fool. Roses are beautiful and vicious and require blood and bone to thrive, but mint is generous, it spreads and shares and asks little. The world needs both, but I know which I'd rather have nearby. Despite everything, Dana felt her mouth twitch towards something that wasn't quite a smile. Are you actually a vampire? Yes, that's impossible. Less impossible than you think. More regulated than you'd hope. He tilted his head. I'm what's called a king in my community, which means I settle disputes, maintain order, and try to keep the younger ones from doing anything catastrophic on social media. It's tedious work, but someone must do it. A vampire king is worried about Instagram? You'd be horrified how many fledglings think posting their fangs is edgy. We have a whole committee dedicated to scrubbing evidence. He sounded genuinely exasperated, and Dana felt something unfamiliar bloom in her chest. Amusement, maybe, or the memory of it. Why are you really here? She asked. Gideon was quiet for a long moment. I make a habit of walking at night, watching. After I failed Isolde, the woman I lost, I couldn't bear the thought of missing someone else's silent exit. So I watch the bridges, the high places, the empty parks. Most nights there's nothing, but when there is, I stay. I talk, I bear witness. It's the only penance I know. That's a lonely way to live. I'm a vampire. Lonely is rather built into the job description. But his voice held warmth beneath the dry humor. Though I confess most of my conversations on bridges are less coherent than this. You're remarkably articulate for 3 a.m. I've been rehearsing. The admission came out flat. True, what would you say? If you could speak to everyone who forgot you. Dana pulled her knees to her chest. I'd say I'm sorry. For disappearing. For not fighting harder to stay visible. I'd say I know I wasn't enough, but I tried. I'd say, her voice cracked. I'd say please remember I was real. Even if I wasn't important, I existed. You are real, Gideon said, fierce now, and the failure isn't yours. The Hartleys are what we call parasites in my world, creatures who feed on others and leave husks behind. They didn't forget you, Dana. They consumed you systematically, and when you tried to reclaim yourself, they convinced you there was nothing left to reclaim. That's not memory failure. That's predation. Hearing it named predation sent a shock through her system. But they didn't break any laws. Neither do many vampires. Technically. Doesn't make it less monstrous. He shifted slightly. What would you do if you believed you could rebuild? I don't know. Get my own apartment again. Find work. Grow something. She shook her head. It sounds stupid. It sounds human, in the best sense. Gideon glanced east, where the sky was still black but less absolute. Dawn is hours away still. Tell me about the worst day with the Hartleys. Why? Because speaking poison aloud helps drain it. And because I'm asking you to trust me with your worst so you know you're not carrying it alone anymore. So Dana told him. About the party where Mrs. Hartley introduced her as the help after years of calling her family. About the time she'd gotten the flu and they'd sent her to work anyway, serving guests while feverish. About the son, Marcus, who'd cornered her once in the kitchen and suggested she should be more grateful for everything they'd given her. His hand on her wrist, his breath on her neck. About how she'd stopped sleeping well because they'd buzz her phone at all hours with demands. About how they'd slowly taken over her bank account, saying it was easier to pay her directly for expenses, until she'd realized they were monitoring every purchase and questioning anything they deemed frivolous. Gideon listened without interrupting, his face growing colder and more remote as she spoke, until he looked like a marble statue of vengeance in the streetlight. When she finished, he was silent for a full minute. Then, I would very much like to introduce the Hartley family to the concept of consequences. They're untouchable. Everyone knows them. Everyone loves them. Everyone knows the version they present. What if someone revealed what's behind the roses? He looked at her intently. You have 5 years of information. You know their business, their contacts, their secrets. You could dismantle them if you chose. I'm nobody. They're their bullies with good PR, and I'm the vampire king of this city, which means I know where bodies are buried, sometimes literally. If you want justice, I can help you build it. But only if you want it. Only if you choose it. Dana stared at him. Why would you do that? Because I'm tired of powerful people treating others as disposable. Because you remind me of Isolde, clever and kind and convinced you're neither. Because I've spent 5 centuries atoning, and perhaps it's time to prevent rather than mourn. His expression softened. And because you're still here talking to me, which means some part of you wants to stay. I'd like to nurture that part. I don't even know you. Then learn. Stay through dawn. Let me buy you breakfast. Let me show you that the world didn't forget you. The world is vast and full of people who never got the chance to know you existed. But they could. The sky had started its slow shift toward gray. Dana realized she was cold, stiff from sitting, and something other than numb, angry maybe, or curious, or just too tired to make permanent decisions at 3 a.m. on a bridge with a vampire. "Breakfast," she said. "And then I'm going home," agreed. Gideon stood, offering his hand. Dana hesitated, then took it. His skin was cool and smooth, his grip careful. He pulled her to her feet with effortless strength. They walked off the bridge together as the first hint of dawn touched the horizon. The diner Gideon chose was old, the kind with red vinyl booths and laminate tables, open 24 hours for insomniacs and night shift workers. Dana slid into a booth while Gideon took the seat across from her, looking wildly out of place in his antique coat and otherworldly beauty. The waitress didn't seem to notice. She poured coffee regular for Dana, black for Gideon, and took their orders with practiced efficiency. "You can eat food?" Dana asked when they were alone. "I can. It tastes like cardboard, but I can simulate humanity when needed." He wrapped his hands around the mug without drinking. "Blood is sustenance. Food is theater. Do you kill people?" "Not anymore. We have systems, blood banks, willing donors, strict regulations. The old ways died out centuries ago in civilized regions. Those who still hunt get put down quickly." His tone suggested he'd done some of that putting down personally. "My role is to enforce those laws. Keep us hidden, keep us civil." "It sounds exhausting." "It is. But the alternative is chaos, and I've lived through enough of that." He studied her across the table. "What will you do now?" "Truly?" Dana poured cream into her coffee, watching it swirl. "I don't know. I need to find a place to live. I've been staying in a motel since I left the Hartleys. I need work, but I don't have references. I need to figure out how to be a person again. Start with the apartment. I know buildings in the city, safe, affordable. I can make introductions." He held up a hand when she started to protest. "Not charity, not rescue, just information you didn't have before. You make the calls yourself. And work? What did you do before the Hartleys?" "Event coordination. I was good at it. I worked for a non-profit that did charity galas. That's actually how I met Mrs. Hartley. She poached me." "Then you have skills. You need someone to vouch for them." Gideon leaned forward. "I host events regularly, vampire court functions, negotiations, ceremonies. They're elaborate and require discretion. If you're willing, I could hire you to coordinate one, pay you properly, give you a legitimate reference that would open doors." Suspicion flared. "Why would you do that?" "Because you're qualified, and I'm perpetually in need of someone who understands both logistics and secrecy." He met her eyes. "And because I mean what I said on the bridge. I want you to have the chance to rebuild. Consider it an investment in proving that people are worth the trouble of saving. I'm not a redemption project. No, you're a competent professional who got caught in a trap. I'm offering you a ladder out, not a hand up. You still have to climb." The waitress returned with food, eggs and toast for Dana, pancakes for Gideon that he didn't touch. Dana ate slowly, feeling the first real hunger she'd had in days. "Tell me about Isolde," she said between bites. Pain flickered across Gideon's face. "She was a servant in a lord's house in France, 15th century. I was newly turned, arrogant, convinced I was above human concerns. She sought me out. There were rumors about what I was, and she wanted to be turned, wanted escape from a life of brutality. I refused her. Said she was too young, too impulsive. Told her to come back in a year if she still wanted it." He paused. "She died that winter. Her master beat her to death over a broken plate. I arrived to turn her and found her body. She was 17. That wasn't your fault, wasn't it? I could have saved her, could have turned her, protected her. Instead, I valued propriety over her life. You couldn't have known. But I should have cared enough to try." His hands tightened around his mug. "I've never made that mistake again. When someone asks for help, I give it. When someone suffers under power, I intervene. It doesn't bring Isolde back, but it means her death taught me something." Dana set down her fork. "I'm not asking you to save me. I know. You're asking me to bear witness while you save yourself. It's different." They sat in silence while the diner filled with early morning commuters. Dana felt something shifting inside her, ice breaking up into pieces that could float away. She wasn't healed, wasn't whole, but she was less alone than she'd been at 3 a.m., and that was something. "Okay," she said finally. "Okay, I'll take the event job. One event. We'll see how it goes." Gideon's smile was small and genuine. "Then I'll have my assistant send you the details. Do you have an email?" "The Hartleys monitored mine. I'll need to set up a new one. Library opens at 9. I'll walk you there." He finally pushed away his untouched pancakes. "And Dana, thank you for staying. Thank you for stopping." When they left the diner, full dawn had broken over the city, and Gideon moved into the shadows instinctively, his coat collar turned up. Not smoking or burning, but clearly uncomfortable. "Does the sun hurt?" Dana asked. "It's unpleasant. Not lethal, but I prefer to avoid it when possible. Like a severe allergy." He kept to the shaded side of the street as they walked. "Most of us sleep during the day out of habit as much as necessity, but you stayed with me until dawn." "I did. Even though it hurt, it was worth the discomfort." He glanced at her. "You were worth the discomfort." Dana didn't know what to say to that, so she said nothing, and they walked through the brightening morning until they reached the library steps. "I'll send those details by noon," Gideon said. "Check your new email." "I will." He hesitated then. "If you need anything before then, if the night gets loud again, I'm going to give you a number. Not for emergencies, not for rescue. Just for another voice in the dark." He handed her a card with a single phone number embossed on heavy stock. Dana tucked it into her pocket. "Don't die because of the sun on my account," she said. "I'm a vampire king, I don't die easily." But he was already moving toward the deeper shadows, toward whatever dark place he called home. "Be well, Dana Summers." She watched him disappear into an alley, impossibly fast, and then she climbed the library steps alone, feeling less like a ghost than she had in months. The apartment Gideon's contact recommended was small, a studio on the 4th floor of an old building in a quiet neighborhood. The landlord, a middle-aged woman named Mrs. Chen, barely asked questions, just verified Dana's information, accepted the deposit, and handed over keys. "Friend of Mr. Quentin's?" she asked while Dana signed paperwork. "Associate. He's a good man, helped my daughter out of trouble a few years back. You're in good hands." Mrs. Chen smiled. "Welcome home." Home. The word felt foreign but possible. Dana moved in with the few belongings she'd managed to retrieve from the Hartleys, mostly clothes, some books, nothing sentimental because they'd claimed anything important had been gifts she couldn't take. She bought a cheap air mattress and dishes from a thrift store, set up her new email, applied for food assistance, and started researching legal aid for employment disputes. 3 days after the bridge, Gideon's assistant emailed event details. A formal reception for visiting vampire dignitaries in 2 weeks, 50 guests. Specific requirements for discretion, security, and menu. The menu was mostly wine and catered blood, which Dana tried not to think about too hard. She threw herself into planning. Researched venues, negotiated contracts, coordinated vendors. It felt good to use her skills again. To be competent and necessary without being consumed, Gideon checked in periodically via email, his messages brief and professional but warm. He answered her questions about vampire etiquette apparently. There were complex rules about seating arrangements based on age and territory, and trusted her judgment on aesthetics. The night before the event, he called. "Nervous?" His voice on the phone was different, more intimate than email. "Terrified I'll forget something critical and start a vampire war. Unlikely. Most wars start over insults or territory, not floral arrangements." He paused. "You've done excellent work. I'm impressed." "Don't be impressed yet. Wait until it's over." "I'm impressed by your thoroughness. The outcome will be what it is." He hesitated. "How are you?" "Not the event, you." Dana sat on her air mattress, phone pressed to her ear. "Better. Still angry, still sad, but better. That's enough for now." "Do you ever feel better? About Isolde?" "No, but I feel useful, which is close enough." His voice softened. "I'm glad you're still here, me too." The event was held in a private mansion on the edge of the city, one of Gideon's properties that he used for formal functions. Dana arrived early to oversee setup, directing caterers and security with the confidence she'd nearly lost. When the guests began arriving, she watched from the sidelines, checking details and managing crises. The vampires were stunning and unsettling, uniformly pale, elegant, moving with predatory grace. Some looked young, others ancient. All carried themselves with pride. Gideon stood at the center, receiving guests with regal ease. He wore formal clothes that looked genuinely antique, black coat with silver embroidery, high collar, his white hair tied back. He looked every inch a king, powerful and untouchable, until he saw Dana and smiled, and the king became someone warmer. He excused himself and crossed to her. "Everything is perfect. The blood supplier almost delivered the wrong type. Apparently AB negative is hard to source, but you fixed it." "I fixed it." She felt a flutter of pride. "I'd like you to join the reception. Not as staff, as my guest. I'm not dressed for—" She gestured at her simple black dress. "You're dressed beautifully. Come." He offered his arm, formal and old-fashioned. Dana took it, and he led her into the main hall. The vampires watched with open curiosity as Gideon introduced her. Dana Summers, the coordinator who'd made the evening possible. A few thanked her, others nodded with distant courtesy. One elderly vampire, a woman named Serafina with silver hair and sharp eyes, studied Dana intently. "You're the one from the bridge," Serafina said. "Not a question." "Ah, yes. Ian mentioned you, said you were remarkable." She glanced at Gideon with something like approval. He's usually right about these things. The evening passed in a blur of conversation and observation. Dana found herself pulled into discussions, vampires asking about modern event trends, logistics, how she managed security with humans. They treated her as an expert, not a servant, and she felt herself standing taller. Later, when the guests had moved to the garden, Gideon found her near the windows. "You're a natural at this," he said. "It's just coordination, it's leadership. There's a difference." He looked out at his guests. "I'd like to hire you permanently. Not just for events, though there are many. I need someone to manage my properties." My schedule, my interactions with the human world, someone I trust. Dana turned to him, stunned. That's a huge job, you're capable of it. And I pay well. Better than well, I'll pay you what you're worth, plus housing if you'd like a place on the estate. Full benefits, reasonable hours, and I promise never to contact you about roses. She laughed despite herself. What's the catch? You'll learn more about my world. See things that might frighten you. Work odd hours sometimes. But you'll never be invisible again. You'll never be powerless again. And if I ever cross a line, you're free to leave with references and severance. Why do you want me specifically? Gideon met her eyes. Because you understand what it's like to be erased. That makes you careful with power. And because I like you, Dana. I like your competence and your anger and the way you're rebuilding yourself piece by piece. I'd like to be part of that rebuilding if you'll let me. It wasn't a declaration of love. It was something steadier, respect maybe, or the foundation for something more. Dana felt her heart beat faster. Can I think about it? Of course, take all the time you need. He hesitated then. Would you like to stay for the rest of the evening? After the guests leave, we could talk. Or just sit. Whatever you prefer, I'd like that. The guests departed near midnight. Gideon's staff cleaned efficiently while Dana helped pack up rentals. When the mansion was quiet again, Gideon led her to a sitting room, filled with books and comfortable chairs. Tell me honestly, Dana said, settling into a chair. Are you doing all this out of guilt? Because I remind you of Isolde? Gideon poured wine, actual wine, not blood, and handed her a glass before taking the chair across from her. At first, perhaps, but not anymore. You're nothing like Isolde, actually. She was desperate and young and looking for someone to save her. You're angry and strong and saving yourself. I'm just trying to make sure you have the resources to do it. And what do you get out of it? Competent help, pleasant company, he swirled his wine. And perhaps the chance to be something other than a king or a killer or a relic. Perhaps the chance to be a friend. Is that what we are, friends? I'd like to be, if that's acceptable. Dana sipped her wine, studying him. In the low light, he looked less like a marble statue and more like someone tired and lonely and trying. Tell me something true. Not about Isolde, about you. I'm 532 years old and I don't remember what warmth feels like, Gideon said quietly. Not physical warmth I remember, son, but emotional warmth, belonging. I've been the king for so long that I've forgotten how to be anything else. Sometimes I walk bridges not to save others but to remember that I'm still capable of caring about something. That's desperately sad, yes. He smiled without humor. But it's honest. I'll take the job, Dana said. Gideon looked up, surprised. You're certain? Not entirely. But I'm certain I want to try, and I'm certain I'd like to keep knowing you. She set down her glass. You're the first person in years who's seen me as a whole person. That means something. It means everything, Gideon said softly. They talked until dawn again, this time about logistics and contracts and what her new life might look like. When the sun rose, Gideon walked her to her car, staying in the shadows. Thank you, Dana said. For what? For not letting me whisper goodbye. Thank you for listening when I said, not while I still breathe. He touched her hand briefly, cool fingers against her warm skin. Be safe, Dana Summers. I'll see you Monday. She drove home as the city woke up, feeling like she was waking up too, and the world was full of possibilities she'd nearly missed. Dana's new job began with a crash course in vampire politics and logistics. Gideon's estate was vast, the mansion where they'd held the event, plus 3 other properties in the city, all requiring maintenance and management. He had investments, business ventures, legal matters spanning centuries that needed modern oversight. And he had court. Court? Dana asked during their first official planning meeting. Every vampire community has a governing structure. In this city, I'm the recognized authority. That means I hear disputes, make judgments, enforce our laws. Gideon pushed a schedule across his desk. It's typically every 2 weeks. Tedious but necessary. Do I need to attend? Only if you're comfortable. But it would help someone to manage logistics, keep things moving, take notes. Most of my court officials are vampires who've been around for centuries and resist anything resembling efficiency. Dana found herself attending court the following week, held in the mansion's grand hall after midnight. Vampires arrived in groups, some deferential, others arrogant. They brought disputes, territorial disagreements, accusations of illegal feeding, requests for permission to turn humans. Gideon presided with calm authority, listening carefully, asking pointed questions, rendering judgments that seemed fair even when harsh. When a young vampire argued back, Gideon's voice dropped to something cold and absolute, and the vampire submitted immediately. Dana watched, fascinated and slightly afraid. This was the other side of the man who'd sat with her on a bridge, the king who commanded predators. Afterward, when the hall had emptied, Gideon found her in the side office where she'd been organizing records. What did you think? He asked. You're terrifying when you want to be. Is that a problem? Dana considered. No, it's just different from the person I've been getting to know. But I suppose you have to be both. I do. The kindness doesn't work without the teeth to back it up. He leans against the desk. Does it change how you see me? It adds to it. You're more than I thought. Scarier and sadder at once. She met his eyes. But I'm not afraid of you. If that's what you're asking, I'd hate for you to be. He smiled slightly. You did excellent work tonight. 3 hours instead of the usual 5. The court is grumbling but impressed. Good. They should grumble less and organize better. Over the following weeks, Dana settled into her new role. She coordinated property maintenance, managed Gideon's calendar, liaised with his human business partners, and attended court sessions with increasing confidence. She learned vampire names, politics, grudges that stretched back decades, and she learned Gideon. He was patient and exacting, with standards as high for himself as others. He worked constantly managing investments, hearing disputes, monitoring his territory for threats, but he also made time for small kindnesses. He remembered Dana's preferences: tea, not coffee in the evenings, silence when she was stressed, humor when she was sad. He asked about her life, her plans, her slowly rebuilding social connections. He never touched her casually, never pushed, never treated her as anything but an equal. Which made the moment she realized she was falling for him both wonderful and terrifying. It happened 6 weeks into the job. Dana was working late in the estate library, organizing files for an upcoming negotiation with a neighboring vampire territory. Gideon found her near midnight, carrying tea. You should rest, he said, setting the cup beside her. Almost done. He settled into the chair across from her desk. I received an interesting call today, from Mrs. Hartley. Dana's head snapped up. What? She'd heard I hired you. Wanted to warn me that you were unstable, a thief prone to lying. His expression was granite. I informed her that you were my most competent employee, that her accusations were slanderous, and that if she contacted me again, I'd ensure her family's social connections became very uncomfortable. Gideon, she then threatened legal action. I had my lawyers send her a cease and desist along with a list of labor violations her family committed during your employment. She hasn't called back. Dana stared at him. You didn't have to do that. Yes, I did. She was spreading lies that could harm you. He leaned forward. I won't allow anyone to erase you again, Dana, not while I have the power to prevent it. She stopped, overwhelmed. Thank you. It's not kindness, it's justice. But his eyes were warm. You're under my protection now, formally if you'll accept it. In vampire terms, that means anyone who harms you answers to me. What does that mean for me? It means you're safe. It means you matter. He paused. It means I care what happens to you, and I'm making that known. Dana's heart hammered. Why? Because you're brilliant and brave, and you've rebuilt yourself from ash. Because you make me laugh and keep my court running and remind me that there's more to existence than duty. His voice dropped. Because somewhere between the bridge and now you've become important to me. More than an employee. More than a friend. Gideon, you don't have to respond. I'm not asking for anything, I just wanted you to know. He stood. Finish your work. I'll be in my study if you need me. He left before Dana could find words, and she sat in the quiet library with her heart racing and her mind spinning. She'd thought she was broken beyond repair. Thought love was something she'd lost the capacity for after the Hartley years. But this feeling, warm and terrifying and utterly certain, suggested otherwise. She was falling in love with a vampire king, and she had no idea what to do about it. Dana found him in his study an hour later. Gideon looked up from his desk, surprise flickering across his face. I thought you'd gone home, he said. I need to say something first. Dana closed the door behind her, leaning against it for courage. You asked me on the bridge what I'd do if I believed I could rebuild. I didn't have an answer then. But I do now, and I'd choose something for myself. Not because someone told me to. Not because it's safe or smart, but because I want it. She took a breath. I'd choose you if you're offering. Gideon went very still. Dana, I know the complications. I know I'm human and you're a vampire king and there are probably rules about this. I know I'm still healing and maybe this is too soon. But I also know that you're the person who stopped when no one else did. You're the person who saw me when I was invisible. And I don't want to lose that. I don't want to lose you. You won't lose me. He stood, moving around the desk but stopping several feet away, giving her space. But you need to understand what you're saying. I'm not human. I'm a predator, Dana. I've killed. I'll live centuries longer than you. I'm cold and dangerous, and caring for me comes with risks. I'm not afraid of you. You should be. But I'm not. She stepped closer. You've had 500 years to hurt me, and you've only been kind. You're dangerous, yes, but not to me. Never to me. You can't know that. Neither can anyone who falls in love. It's always a risk. She closed the distance between them. I'm choosing the risk. I'm choosing you. Gideon's control cracked. He reached for her, hands framing her face with exquisite care. I don't deserve this. Maybe not. But I'm offering it anyway. Dana rose on her toes, and he met her halfway. The kiss was soft, tentative, like he was afraid she'd break. Dana pressed closer, and he responded with restrained intensity, one hand sliding into her hair while the other settled at her waist. He was cool against her warmth, careful with his strength, and it was the most wanted she'd felt in years. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Gideon rested his forehead against hers. "I want this," he said quietly. "I want you, but I need you to be certain. I need you to know what you're accepting. Then show me, tell me, let me learn." She cupped his face, feeling the impossible smoothness of his skin. "I'm not running. I'm choosing to stay, then stay." He kissed her again, deeper this time, and Dana felt 5 years of invisibility burn away in the heat of being chosen in return. They took it slowly after that. Dates that felt like courtship from another era, Gideon escorting her to private concerts, late-night dinners in empty restaurants he'd rented out, walks through the city when most people slept. He was attentive and romantic in old-fashioned ways, bringing her flowers, writing notes in elegant script, asking permission before every touch. Donna learned his routines. He slept during the day in a windowless room deep in the estate. He drank bagged blood with the enthusiasm of someone taking vitamins. He read voraciously modern fiction, history, science, trying to keep pace with a world that changed faster than he did. She learned his vulnerabilities too, the nightmares about Isolde that left him silent and withdrawn, the pressure of ruling a community that didn't always want to be ruled, the loneliness of outliving everyone he'd ever cared about. "I'll outlive you too," he said one night. They were in his private quarters, Dana curled against his side on a sofa while he read. "That's the worst part of caring for you. I'll have centuries to regret every moment I didn't treasure, then treasure them now," Dana said. "Don't mourn me while I'm still here. I'm trying." He set down his book, pulling her closer. "But I can't help calculating. You're 29. If you live to 90, I have 60 years. It sounds like a lot, but it's nothing. A blink. Would you want me to turn? Eventually?" The question hung between them. Gideon was quiet for a long moment. "I would want you to have the choice Isolde never did. But I'd never pressure you. It's your life, Dana. Your mortality. I won't steal it no matter how much I'd love centuries with you. What if I wanted it? Then we'd discuss it seriously. The reality, not the fantasy. You'd lose the sun. Lose human food, human warmth. You'd watch everyone you know age and die. You'd become a predator, and that changes you. Some transitions go well. Others don't. The person comes out different, harder. There's no guarantee you'd even like what you became." Dana absorbed this. "But you'd turn me if I asked, if you were certain, if you'd thought it through, if it was your choice, not mine." He kissed her temple. "Ask me again in a year, or 10, or never. I'll love you regardless." It was the first time he'd said the word love aloud, and Dana felt it settle into her bones like truth. "I love you too," she said, and felt him smile against her hair, but peace didn't last. 2 months into their relationship, Dana received a call from an unknown number. She almost didn't answer, but something made her pick up. A male voice, cold and amused. "You've been busy. Who is this?" "Marcus Hartley. You remember you worked for my mother." Dana's blood chilled. "I have nothing to say to you." "That's unfortunate because I have things to say to you about new employer, about the accusations you've apparently been spreading, about the lawyers who've been harassing my family." His voice hardened. "You think you can hide behind some eccentric rich man? You think that makes you untouchable? I think you should stop calling me, or what? You'll run to your boyfriend? Tell him the big bad humans are scaring you?" Marcus laughed. "You always were pathetic. My mother was right to use you. You're good for nothing except serving your betters." Dana hung up, hands shaking. Gideon found her 20 minutes later, still sitting with her silent phone. He took one look at her face and went cold. "What happened?" she told him. Gideon's expression grew increasingly remote, the king overtaking the man. "He threatened you. He insulted me. That's different. Not to me." He pulled out his own phone, dialing. "This ends now. Gideon, don't do anything illegal." "I won't." "Permanent?" "Absolutely." He spoke into the phone. "It's Quentin. I need everything on the Hartley family. Business, finances, personal, everything by tomorrow." He hung up and turned to Dana. "They're going to learn what it means to threaten someone under my protection. I don't want you to hurt them. I won't lay a hand on them. But I'm going to dismantle their power piece by piece until they're as invisible as they tried to make you." Over the next week, Gideon worked with methodical precision. He pulled records, made calls, leveraged connections. He discovered that the Hartley family's wealth came partly from exploiting workers, not just Dana, but dozens over the years, all silenced with threats and legal intimidation. He found financial irregularities, tax evasion, embezzlement, and he went to the authorities. Not as a vampire, they didn't know what he was, but as a wealthy, connected citizen with evidence and lawyers and the will to see justice done. The investigation that followed was swift and brutal. The Hartleys' assets were frozen. Mrs. Hartley and Marcus were arrested for fraud and labor violations. Their social circle, built on reputation, crumbled as news spread. Donna watched it happen with mixed emotions: satisfaction, guilt, relief. When Gideon asked if she wanted to testify, she said yes. The hearing was public. Dana stood in front of a judge and lawyers and told her story: the isolation, the manipulation, the threats. Other former employees came forward too, adding their voices. Mrs. Hartley sat in the defendant's chair, looking small and furious and utterly stripped of power. When she tried to speak, to defend herself, the judge silenced her. The Hartleys were found guilty on multiple counts: fines, restitution, probation. Their reputation destroyed beyond repair. Walking out of the courthouse, Dana felt lighter than she had in years. Gideon waited by his car, staying in the shade of the building. When he saw her, his expression softened. "How do you feel?" he asked. "Free." She laughed, surprised by the truth of it. "I feel free." "Good." He opened the car door for her. "You are completely." They drove back to the estate in comfortable silence. When they arrived, Gideon led her not inside, but to the gardens behind the mansion's sprawling grounds Dana had barely explored. "I had something prepared," he said, guiding her down a stone path. "A project if you're interested." They rounded a corner and Dana stopped. A section of the garden had been cleared and prepared: tilled soil, raised beds, trellises waiting for plants. In the center stood a small greenhouse, glass panels gleaming. "I thought you might want to grow things again," Gideon said quietly. "Herbs, vegetables, flowers, whatever you choose. This space is yours, to tend or ignore, to share or keep private, entirely your decision." Dana walked into the space, running her hands over the empty beds. Rich soil, good light, possibility. "Why?" she asked, voice thick. "Because you told me once that you liked keeping things alive. Because you deserve space that's yours. Because I want you to have roots here, if you'll stay." She turned to him. "I'll stay, even knowing what I am, what we are, especially knowing." She crossed to him, taking his hands. "You're the vampire king who stopped a stranger on a bridge. Who fought for me when I couldn't fight for myself. Who gave me back my life. I'm not leaving that. I'm not leaving you." Gideon pulled her close, and they stood in the garden as the sun set, a vampire and a human planning a future together. 6 months later, Dana's garden was thriving. She grew mint and basil and rosemary, tomatoes and peppers, flowers she chose for beauty rather than propriety. She invited people to visit, former co-workers she'd reconnected with, new friends from the city, even Mrs. Chen from her old apartment building. The garden became a gathering place, a symbol of growth and healing. Dana started a small program offering space to others who'd felt forgotten, teaching them to grow things, providing community. Gideon watched from the shadows, proud and protective, funding the program without fanfare. Their relationship deepened into something steady and certain. They worked together, managing the estate and court. They navigated vampire politics and human complications. They learned each other's rhythms: Dana's need for sunlight and warmth, Gideon's preference for darkness and quiet. And they loved each other with the kind of devotion that came from both choosing to stay when leaving would have been easier. One evening, a year and a half after the bridge, they sat in the garden at dusk. Dana was planting bulbs for spring while Gideon read beside her, finally comfortable in the fading light. "I've been thinking," Dana said, not looking up from her work. "Dangerous pastime," she smiled. "About what you said, about turning, about having a choice." Gideon set down his book, giving her his full attention. "And I want to wait a few more years. I want to live human for a while longer, see my garden through seasons, reconnect with my family, be warm." She brushed dirt from her hands. "But eventually, if the offer stands, I'd like to turn. I'd like centuries with you, not just decades. The offer stands." Always his voice was careful. "But you understand what you'd give up?" "I do, and I think it's worth it. For you, for us, for the chance to build something lasting." She met his eyes. "I'm not running from humanity. I'm choosing immortality. There's a difference." "There is." Gideon reached for her hand. "Then we'll wait. And when you're ready, I'll turn you with every protection I can offer. I'll make sure the transition is as gentle as possible, and I'll be with you every moment, even the scary ones, especially those." He pulled her close, heedless of the dirt on her clothes. "I've waited 500 years for you, Dana Summers. I can wait a few more for you to be certain. I am certain." She kissed him, soft and sure. "I'm choosing you, not while I still breathe, but even after." "Forever, forever," Gideon echoed, and it sounded like a vow. 3 years later, Dana stood in Gideon's private quarters, wearing simple clothes, her affairs in order. She'd spent the days saying temporary goodbyes to her family, who knew she was taking an extended trip but not the truth. To her friends who understood she was changing jobs. To her garden, which would be tended by others while she transitioned. She was 33, confident, healed from the wounds the Hartleys had left. She'd built a life she loved, and now she was choosing to extend it. "Last chance," Gideon said. He stood before her, solemn and beautiful. "Once I turn you, there's no reversing it, I know." Dana cupped his face. "I'm ready. It will hurt. The venom burns. You'll feel like you're dying because in a way you are. I'll stay with you through all of it, but I can't take the pain away. I trust you." Gideon searched her face for doubt and found none. He nodded slowly. "Then we begin." He guided her to the bed, settling her comfortably. "I'm going to bite here. He touched her throat just above the pulse. The venom spreads quickly. 3 days of transition, maybe 4. I'll be here the entire time, okay? He leaned down, his breath cool against her skin. I love you, Dana, in this life and the next. I love you too. The bite was sharp, then burning. Dana gasped as venom flooded her system, liquid fire racing through veins. Gideon pulled back, his eyes regretful, and settled beside her, holding her hand as the pain intensified. True to his word, he never left. The transition was agony. Dana burned and screamed and wept while Gideon murmured comfort and kept her as still as possible. He brought cool cloths, spoke softly, counted the hours. On the 3rd day, the pain peaked and broke. Dana felt her heart slow, then stop, felt her lungs go still, felt herself die. And then she opened her eyes to a world transformed. Everything was sharper colors, more vivid, sounds crystalline, scents overwhelming. She could hear Gideon's breathing, the rustle of fabric, heartbeats from distant rooms. She could smell blood and earth and night. She sat up, movements inhumanly fast, and Gideon caught her shoulders gently. Slowly, he said. Your strength is different now. You need to learn control. Dana looked at her hands. Pale as marble, strong, tipped with nails that could tear. She looked at Gideon and saw him truly for the first time, not just beautiful but radiant, powerful, hers. How do you feel, he asked. Different, good, hungry. He smiled. That's normal. I have blood prepared, ethically sourced, I promise. He helped her stand, steadying her when she moved too fast. Welcome to immortality, Dana. She kissed him, and it was different now. No warmth differential, no fragility. They were matched, equal, eternal. Thank you, she whispered against his lips. For what? For not letting me say goodbye. For giving me forever instead. Adjusting to vampirism took months. Dana learned to control her strength, to feed without revulsion, to navigate a world that looked different through immortal eyes. She discovered she had a gift for sensing emotions, a power that made her even more effective in court. She kept her garden, tending it at night now, teaching others under moonlight instead of sun. She missed warmth sometimes, missed coffee and hot showers and afternoon light. But she had time, endless time, and Gideon beside her. They worked together as partners in truth, now co-ruling the territory, managing court, building a community that valued strength and compassion equally. Dana became known as a fair judge, a skilled negotiator, a queen in all but name. When Gideon finally proposed, 5 years after her turning, it was in the garden she'd built. I know we have eternity, he said, kneeling with old-world formality. But I'd like to spend it married to you if you'll have me. Yes, Dana pulled him up, kissing him with centuries of love ahead. Yes, always. They married in a private ceremony, vampire and human guests both, a blending of worlds. Serafina officiated, ancient and amused. Dana wore white and Gideon wore silver, and they pledged themselves to each other with vows that meant something when you had forever to keep them. The reception was held in the garden, now lush and sprawling. Dana stood at the center of life she'd grown from ash, surrounded by people who saw her, loved her, celebrated her. Gideon found her at midnight, when most guests had departed. Happy? He asked. Unbelievably. She leaned into him. I keep thinking about the bridge, about how close I came to ending everything. But you didn't because you stopped. You said not while I still breathe. She looked up at him. You gave me my life back, and now we get to live it together, forever. Not while I still breathe, Gideon echoed, and now we breathe in eternity. They stood in the garden as dawn approached, no danger now, not to either of them. The sky lightened and the world woke, and 2 vampires who'd found each other in darkness watched the sunrise together, immortal and in love and grateful for every moment they'd chosen to stay. Years passed. Decades. Dana and Gideon became legends in vampire society, the king and his queen who ruled with wisdom and compassion. They expanded their garden into a sanctuary, a place where the forgotten could find community and purpose. They championed reforms in vampire law, protecting the vulnerable, punishing predators. And they loved each other through it all with a devotion that deepened rather than faded. On their 50th wedding anniversary, 68 years after the bridge, they returned to where it had begun. The bridge over black water, rebuilt now but still standing. Do you ever regret it? Dana asked. They stood where she'd once contemplated ending, looking at the river below. Stopping that night, taking on my chaos? Never. Gideon pulled her close. You were never chaos, you were possibility, you still are. I think about her sometimes, who I was then. How small the world felt, how invisible I was, and now I'm seen, loved, powerful. She smiled. Now I have forever to grow things and help people and love you. It's more than I ever imagined. You deserved more all along. I'm just grateful I got to be part of giving it to you. They stayed on the bridge until dawn, 2 vampires comfortable in their skin, immortal and together. When they finally left, they walked not into shadows but toward the sunrise, fearless and whole. Dana never whispered goodbye to the world again. Instead, she spent eternity saying hello to new people, new gardens, new possibilities. And Gideon stood beside her through all of it. The vampire king who'd chosen love over loss and proved that sometimes saying "not while I still breathe" was the beginning of forever. In their garden sanctuary, bulbs planted 50 years ago still bloomed every spring. Mint spread with generous abundance. Roses grew alongside, both beautiful, both necessary. And people who'd felt forgotten found their way to the space, drawn by rumors of a vampire queen who'd once stood on a bridge and chosen to stay. Dana greeted them all, remembered their names, helped them plant their own gardens. She told them the truth she'd learned, that being forgotten wasn't the same as being gone. That choosing to stay, to rebuild, to grow was the bravest thing anyone could do. That the world was full of people who would see them, if they gave it the chance, and when the nights got hard, when new arrivals felt that old pull toward bridges and endings, Dana would sit with them as Gideon once sat with her. She'd say the words that had saved her life, "Not while I still breathe." And then she'd add, "And not while I'm here to remember you." 'Cause that was the gift Gideon had given her, and the gift she now passed forward, the simple, profound act of bearing witness, of refusing to let anyone disappear, of proving that being seen was sometimes all it took to want to stay. She and Gideon built a life, an empire, a legacy of compassion from the ashes of two people who'd known loss and chosen love instead. They ruled with wisdom, loved with devotion, and created space for the forgotten to be found. And every night when the moon rose over their garden, Gideon would find Dana among the herbs and flowers. He'd pull her close and she'd rest against his chest, and they'd stand in comfortable silence, two immortals grateful for the moment that had changed everything. "Thank you," Dana would whisper sometimes. "For what?" Gideon always asked, though he knew. "For stopping, for staying, for showing me that forever was possible." "Thank you for letting me," he'd reply. "For choosing to stay when leaving seemed easier. For teaching me that saving someone is really just standing beside them while they save themselves." They'd kiss then, soft and certain, and return to their garden, their court, their endless life together. And somewhere, on a bridge over black water, the city lights reflected like stars, and the river flowed on, and two people who'd met there in darkness had built something luminous from the meeting. Not a rescue, not a tragedy, but a choice made twice, once to stay, once to love, that had bloomed into forever. Dana Quentin, vampire queen, gardener, champion of the forgotten, stood in her sanctuary one cool evening, 80 years after the bridge, and smiled. She was surrounded by thriving plants, grateful people, and a husband who loved her across centuries. The world hadn't forgotten her. It had simply been waiting for her to remember herself. And she had, with help, with time, with love. She'd remembered and rebuilt and bloomed. The garden grew, the court thrived, and two vampires who'd found each other in the darkest hour lived on in joy, proving that the best revenge against those who tried to erase you was to become unforgettable. "Not while I still breathe," Gideon had said, and Dana had breathed human, then vampire, then eternal, and built a life so beautiful that everyone who witnessed it remembered her name. She whispered goodbye to the woman who'd stood on a bridge and felt invisible. But she said hello to forever, to love, to the garden that never stopped growing. And the vampire king who'd refused to let her fade stood beside her through it all, devoted and proud and grateful that he'd walked that bridge on that particular night, and found the woman who would teach him that saving grace came not from preventing tragedy, but from offering someone a reason to stay. They had eternity. They chose to spend it together, growing things in the dark, loving fiercely, and making sure that no one under their care ever felt forgotten again. And that was enough, more than enough. It was everything.